Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Waiting for the verse, I guess. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayamudiriyat nasta prayashrabhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 2, entitled Dakṣa Curses Lord Śiva. Today we are doing verse 3 and 4. Verse 3 has no purport, so I'll read that by myself, then we'll read verse 4 together. Okay, so text 3. So I'll just chant this by myself. Etad ākhyāhi me brahman jāmātuḥ śvaśurasya vidveṣas tu yataḥ prāṇāṁs tatyaje dustyajān Satī. So Vidura is inquiring, my dear Maitreya, to part with one's life is very difficult. Would you kindly explain to me how such a son-in-law and father-in-law could quarrel so bitterly that the great goddess Satī could give up her life? Thank you. So text 4, we'll chant this together. Maitreya uvāca purā viśva-sṛjāṁ satrē samita parama-ṛṣayaḥ tathāmara-gaṇāḥ sarve sa-anugāḥ munayognaya. Maitreya uvāca purā viśva-sṛjāṁ satrē samita parama-ṛṣayaḥ tathāmara-gaṇāḥ sarve sa-anugāḥ munayognaya. So please chant the verse. Anyone else? Okay. Word for word translations. Maitreya uvāca. The sage Maitreya said. Purā. Formerly, at the time of Svāyambhuva Manu. Viśva-sṛjāṁ. Of the creators of the universe. Satī, at a sacrifice. Yataḥ, were assembled. Parama-ṛṣayaḥ, the great sages. Etad, and also. Amara-gaṇāḥ, the demigods. Sarve, all. Sa-anugāḥ, along with their followers. Munayah, the philosophers. Ākhyāhi, the fire gods. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The sage Maitreya said, in a former time, the leaders of the universal creation performed a great sacrifice in which all the great sages, philosophers, demigods, and fire gods assembled with their followers. So here we have Maitreya beginning to answer Vidura's inquiry that why was Dakṣa, who was so affectionate towards his daughter, envious of Lord Śiva, and why did he neglect his daughter Satī, and why did Satī give up her life? Because of the quarrel between her father and her husband. So now we have Maitreya beginning to answer. So purport, upon being asked by Vidura, the sage Maitreya began to explain the cause of the misunderstanding between Lord Śiva and Dakṣa, because of which the goddess Satī gave up her body. Thus begins the history of a great sacrifice performed by the leaders of the universal creation, namely Marichi, Dakṣa, and Vasishta. These great personalities arranged for a great sacrifice for which demigods like Indra and the fire gods assembled with their followers. Lord Brahma and Lord Śiva were also present. Amara-gaṇāḥ jnāna-shalakaya chakshu unmilitamena tasmai shri gurave namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam. Namo Vishnu-padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtatadeshatarine. So here we have the Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam giving the history of the activities of the universal creation. So this goes back way into the time when Svāyambhuva Manu was the Manu of this particular universe. Svāyambhuva Manu is the first out of 14 Manus in a day of Brahma. It does not specify here which day of Brahma this is are taking place in, whether it's this particular day of Brahma or in the past, we're not too sure, but it's at least, I have the calculation here, at least something like 308.6 million years ago. No, way longer than that. First Manu. Okay, 1 second here. Anyways, a very long time. Times 7. Okay, that's the 308 million years is 1 Manu. Okay, so times 7. So whatever that is. 2 billion. Okay. So at least 2 billion years ago. If it's in this day of Brahma, correct? Okay. So that's a long time. So the performance of yajna is being performed here for the satisfaction of Vishnu, yajna, purush. Yajna or sacrifice is mentioned throughout the Vedic literature as an offering to the gods, or in other words, to please either Vishnu or the demigods. So there's different types of yajnas. We have the different khandas within the Vedic literature. We have the karma khanda, which describes yajnas meant for one's own benefit, sense gratification, and materialistic pursuits. Then we have the jnana khanda, which is meant basically ultimately to realize the supreme Brahman. And then we have the upasana khanda section of the Vedas, which describes yajnas to please the Supreme Lord Vishnu. So this particular yajna, although Dakṣa is a highly elevated personality, as we heard so thoroughly yesterday, we should understand that he's not completely transcendental. And he's actually giving the, you can say, a great example of someone who is in a neophyte stage of spiritual development. Dakṣa was interested in karma khanda, in his own sense gratification, you can say. And although he's engaging in activities that are indirectly devotional service, he's still bogged down by materialistic activities and material pursuits. So because of this influence by the mode of passion and ignorance, he acted viciously toward Lord Shiva and Narada Muni in another portion of Srimad Bhagavatam that we'll read. So due to this mentality and creating aparads, Vaishnava aparads, we'll see his downfall and the struggles that he goes through. So any situation that we're going through in life that we're having trouble with, it's because we're not applying the third verse of the Shikshashtakam, to be more humble than a blade of grass, offering all respects to others, being more tolerant than a tree. So this is actually the panacea for all of our problems in this world, is if we apply that nice description given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So although Dakṣa was engaged in yajna, it wasn't ultimately for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Otherwise he would not have created this offense to Lord Shiva. So this is tangible proof that there was materialistic motives to this. So in spite of the request of the people that were assembled at this sacrificial arrangement, still Dakṣa created an offense to Lord Shiva. Everybody was basically telling him to chill out and not criticize such a great soul, but out of anger, which is very detrimental to our spiritual life, he left the arena after blaspheming Lord Shiva, and he left just out of anger, basically. And then thus far, before he left, there was the cursing of Nandishvara, Lord Shiva's bull carrier, and then there was like counter cursing by Bhrigu and Dakṣa's followers. So there's just like cursing and counter cursing and offenses to one another, and then ultimately just Dakṣa was fried out and he left. And So you see here that Lord Shiva's character is glorified because despite the cursing and the counter-cursing, Lord Shiva was tranquil. He didn't respond, basically. He was very upset that there was animosity and people were creating offenses, but he himself did not get involved. So this is a nice example for us to follow. And then it describes that although there was cursing and counter-cursing, Dakṣa left, there was drama, still the sacrifice was not destroyed. And the brahmanas there continued the sacrifice actually for quite a few years into the future after Dakṣa had left the assembly. It says later on, I think it's in the next chapter or later in this chapter. So there's this one verse, Tasmin tushte jagat tushta, that when Lord Vishnu is satisfied, all demigods are satisfied. Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, right? When you water the root of the tree, all branches and leaves are nourished. We read that over and over again. But on the other hand, it's very interesting because in the next chapter, we'll read that because Dakṣa offended Lord Shiva, Vishnu ultimately was not pleased. And then it's described that any sacrifice meant to please Vishnu but doesn't please the demigods is not complete. So this is very interesting because you have 2 points of views. That even if you don't serve the demigods directly, if you don't please them, you just water the root of the tree, namely Lord Vishnu, everyone's satisfied. But on the other hand, there's another angle to see it, that if you don't please all the demigods, then Lord Vishnu is not pleased. So it really depends on one's intention and also what type of sacrifice are they performing. If it's through karma kanda, you have to go through all the necessary steps of pleasing all the individual personalities present at the yajna. And if it's with pure devotion, if the yajna is intended with the goal to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then obviously one is not offending Krishna's parts and parcels, but one is serving directly Vishnu and automatically all the demigods are pleased. So it's just 2 angles to look at the same situation, and it really depends on one's intention and consciousness of what they're trying to achieve. Is it something for your own personal self, or is it ultimately just to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And so, same is described in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna describes the same thing, that if one is on a transcendental platform, then one does not have to water all the individual leaves and branches in performing so many different ritualistic activities. But if one is not on that platform yet, then one has to go through the preliminary stages of rituals and sacrifice mentioned in the Vedas. It's actually one's duty to do so. So because of the tension of Dakṣa and Shiva, really just on Dakṣa's side, Lord Brahma was also not pleased by this. But what happened was, after this specific yajna, Dakṣa left, Lord Brahma still appointed Dakṣa as the chief of the Prajapatis. And Dakṣa obviously was puffed up with his position, and he started another yajna. So this is the scene when Satī wants to come. All her family members are there. She's offended, and then by her mystic power, she goes up in flames. But this specific yajna is described as the Vajrapeya yajna, and it's basically meant to enhance the power of a king or a ruler or a chief. So Dakṣa actually created this yajna for his own glorification, basically, and so that was the whole setting of this second yajna, not the one we're reading here, but the one we'll read in the next chapter, is basically just to coronate Dakṣa as the chief of the Prajapatis. So it's very interesting because that's the specific yajna, although it's meant for his own glorification, that's the scene where he gets his head cut off and he gets the head of a goat. So, described as the yajna for one's own powerful position. But it's very interesting that in the Śiva Purana, it's described that the highest, it's also described in the Śrīmad Bhagavatam, I think it's the 6th canto, that the highest worship, or the highest yajna one can perform is worship of Vishnu, but even higher than that is aradhanam, right? What's the word that I'm trying to find? Yeah, tidyanam. The paraphernalia, or specifically the devotees connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is even higher than worshipping Vishnu. So this was Dakṣa's predicament, that because he was materialistic, he cannot appreciate the exalted position of the Vaishnavas, and rather because his materialistic motive was involved, then he thought himself to be the supreme, to be the controller, to be the enjoyer. So that's the nature of everybody in this world, right? We want to be the enjoyer, the controller. Prabhupada explains that that's how the soul comes into this material world. Basically, we're trying to imitate God. So we have something called this material world specifically because we have this God project that we want to be the controller. We want to be the enjoyer. And even in the name of serving Vishnu or performing yajna, many times on the neophyte stage, that desire is involved. So yes, we're performing activities that look like pure devotional service so that other people think that we're highly elevated and we're spiritually advanced. So that's not anya bala shita shunyam jnana karma dinavritam. That's more of using God to become God. Very interesting. So in the third dimensional reality we see in the concrete jungle out there is people are using God's energy to be the supreme. And even in a devotional setting, even within a temple, we could be using God's energy, even God directly in the form of the Archa-vigraha, with the desire to also be the supreme. So it's very subtle, something that we have to be aware of basically on a daily basis. And Prabhupada would mention how his disciples had a disease that they were not afraid of Maya enough. They took Maya to be not very powerful. But there's also another disease, is that we don't take Vaishnava aparad serious enough. And it's very scary that some devotees aren't scared to offend other devotees, to lash out on them. And we see that this is also a very neophyte stage. It's devotional service influenced by the mode of ignorance. Kapila Muni describes in the 3rd canto that devotional service can be performed even within the 3 modes of nature. It's not that automatically you rise to a transcendental platform. Devotional service itself is transcendental, but you yourself may not be on a highly elevated position. So you may be performing a transcendental activity, but influenced by the mode of ignorance. It's almost like a very dirty homeless person who's, let's say, like addicted to some hardcore drugs, but they have some shiny gold in their hand. They may not even know the value of the gold. So the gold itself is pure, and they're actually holding it, but they themselves are contaminated, and they'll use that gold for a contaminated activity. So we have to rise above the platform of tamagun and rajagun, and the way we do this is Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. And that's why Srila Prabhupada stresses the importance of rising early in the morning, chanting 16 rounds, following the 4 regulative principles. 4 regulative principles are meant to bring us to the stage of cleanliness, both external and internally, so that we can actually appreciate transcendence. It's easier to practice spiritual life, to become a transcendentalist. Otherwise, if we're influenced by the lower modes, we may follow in the footsteps of Dakṣa, and although seemingly performing the yajnas mentioned in the Vedic literature, we may not have a transcendental vision while performing such. So we have 2 different examples. We have Dakṣa, who also learned from Brahma how to perform a yajna, how to be a priest, how to be the chief of the Prajapatis. But Brahma taught him the karma-kanda vision. And then we have Lord Brahma, who also instructs Narada Muni. But Narada Muni, he's teaching pure transcendental knowledge. Lord Brahma, being the head of our sampradaya, knows exactly what he's doing. We should understand Guru knows what he's doing. So he's reciprocating with the individual how the individual wants to receive knowledge. So ultimately we understand that this whole creation is created by Krishna to rectify the conditioned soul. So even though Dakṣa performs Vaishnava aparad on quite a few occasions, gets his head cut off, gets a goat head, it's really for the betterment of that individual soul. Dakṣa is also part and parcel of Krishna. Ultimately, he's a pure spiritual entity. So Krishna has his benefit in mind also, giving us the example of the pastimes of his mistakes, so that we can also learn. But this whole thing is arranged by Krishna. It's also Krishna's pastime of Dakṣa getting cursed and so on and so forth. So instead of learning the hard way, instead of Maya kicking us in the face, and the 3 types of intelligence, you have to learn your lesson by making the mistake, and then hopefully eventually you will learn something. But a higher intelligence is first you hear from the spiritual master, you hear from Krishna directly, and you just learn from that. So it really depends on us how we want to learn. Do we want to get kicked hard in the face, or do we just want to be humble and bow to the lotus feet of our spiritual master without him kicking us, but him just letting us rest our head on his lotus feet? So those are 2 different options in spiritual life. So I don't really know what to say. It's 8:24. If anybody has any questions or comments or corrections, you can ask them now. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you for the nice class, Prabhu. So here you can see that Dakṣa, he's actually a leader, right? Because he's given an important roles and responsibilities by Lord Brahma himself. And here we can see that he's committing a mistake. So generally the tendency is that whenever a leader commits any mistake, people in general, we see that they try to take him down, or ask him to resign, or there will be protests, all these things happening. But here we can see that even though apparently there is some deficiency, deficiency means 2 things. A leader requires a skill, a particular skill in doing a certain job. Also he needs some character, right? A person may have skill, but he may not have character all the time. And but still we can see that Lord Brahma or even Vishnu, when he's performing the sacrifice, they are empowering him even further, right? They're not like trying to take him down or things like that. But whereas today we can see that people, whenever they see any fault, they want to take the leader down. So from this kind of pastime, how should a devotee should see or accept a leader in whom there could be some apparent faults, or should we cooperate, or what's the criteria to not cooperate, and how should be taken that? Should he be empowered, or should be taken down, or should be given to undergo some correction where he can learn? How would you see that?
Prabhu, I think you know better than I do. Would you like to? Okay, Brugapati Prabhu, please, Sachitana.
Yeah, and in Detroit, there was a temple president, I forget his name, but Prabhupada appointed him temple president, and then he left, and then when he came back, the devotees had politicked or whatever to ask him to step down and made somebody else temple president. And then Prabhupada had a meeting with the devotees involved, and he said, so why is it that so-and-so is not temple president now? And he said, well, Prabhupada, we don't think he was chanting his rounds. And Prabhupada said, how do I know you're chanting your rounds? And Prabhupada had him reinstated, the former temple president. So, as far as a leader goes, if a leader is put in a position by somebody who's more of a leader than him, it's not the Vaishnava thing to kind of like overthrow the government. You have to respect that person's status until it's overturned by, some higher authority. That was what, at least that's the example. That's my understanding of what happened there in Detroit anyway. Govardhan was his name, I believe, yeah. And I won't mention the names of the people who politicked him out, but anyway, Prabhupada reinstated him.
There's another incident also that I just remembered. I think it was in New York, and I heard this many times, that a devotee leader, temple president, and I don't know which other position he had, he somehow that he was breaking the principles. He was even offering something not mentionable to the deities or something like that. And the devotees got disturbed, and when Prabhupada knew about this, he wasn't happy. He's like, how come you didn't do anything? But to the leaders, and to the ordinary people, they were respectful because they didn't know what to do. So there is a way how to do these things. Someone who has, the peers or those who are in the position can help that person or rectify the situation. And I think in the other sense, he was also, I don't know if, I'm sure of this, that the ordinary people were not like making war of that or like fighting at the back. So Prabhupada was satisfied to see that they maintained themselves sober and respectful to that. And you were one of the ordinary people. So that is appreciated too, because it's among your superiors, but at the same time, those who are in the same level or those who have authority, they can. And Prabhupada got upset because the other ones who are in that position did not respond and act properly. So that's my memories of that.
Good question. Why did Lord Brahma encourage him? Rather than, because that's a serious thing what he did, blaspheming Lord Śiva and all. So why is it after doing that, according to you, he was appointed to be the president of a head Prajapati and allowed to perform another yajna like that? That's a good question. I don't know the answer. Lord Brahma appointed him. He blasphemed Dakṣa blasphemed Lord Śiva like anything in that first time, and some time passed, and then Lord Brahma later, subsequently, is appointing him as the head Prajapati, and he's in a position to perform a second sacrifice. So why, after doing that to Lord Śiva, that's a major, super major offense, why is Lord Brahma giving him, not just another chance, but even like a promotion to the head Prajapati? I don't know the answer to the question. Maybe Shamachandra does, I don't know. Do you know?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a answer as such, but I can just give some of my thoughts. Generally the tendency is that whenever we evaluate a person, we always go by yes or no, right or wrong, this kind of a mentality, like it's a black and white situation. But if you see the definition of a demigod versus a demon, what is a demigod and what is a demon? Demigod means someone who accepts the authority of Lord Vishnu and they cooperate with Lord Vishnu, and demon is someone who opposes Lord Vishnu and they do not cooperate with the thing. So that's a simple criteria, because Dakṣa, even though he may have character deficiency, but he's still cooperating. He's still accepting the authority of Lord Vishnu, he's still accepting the authority of Lord Brahma, and he's cooperating. So as long as a person is cooperating, just leave him alone, You can work with him. That's what I would think.
Police, they'll deal with anything, but they don't like to get involved with domestic violence. So maybe this comes in a little bit in the category like that. This is between, Śiva and his father-in-law. It's kind of like a family thing. And like Shama-Chamsa pointed out, on the whole, Dakṣa is very cooperative to Lord Vishnu. He's doing a lot of things right, and that's their, family affair. So maybe I don't know, but maybe that's a relevant thing to add.
Okay, is that it?
One time I heard this from a senior devotee GBC member that really rings my... It really struck me when he said that yes, it could solve all the problems if we just do one thing. I need to be corrected. We all do mistakes. We are in every action or whatever we do, among devotees or even individually. But if you don't accept that correction, if you overreact, like in this whole Jagya thing is overreaction, curse, and they were cursing back and forth. You say, I need to be corrected. Please correct me. Of course, that requires a lot of humility.
Okay, Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.